Hello, everybody. A very warm welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us today for the webinar on India Alliance Early Career Fellowships in Basic Biomedical Research. I hope you're doing well and taking good care of yourselves and your loved ones. My name is Hina Latif. I am Communications and Public Engagement Consultant at the TBT Wellcome Trust India Alliance, and I'm your host for today's webinar. Before we begin, let me quickly give you an introduction to the TBT Wellcome Trust India Alliance, or India Alliance for short. India Alliance is an independent, dynamic public charity that funds research in health and biomedical sciences in India. India Alliance invests in transformative ideas and supportive research ecosystems to advance discovery and innovation to improve health and well-being. It is funded by the Department of Biotechnology, Government of India, and the Wellcome Trust UK. For more information, you can visit our website. You can see the name on the screen, indiaalliance.org, or you can follow us on our social media handles, which are displayed on the screen. A few housekeeping pointers before we get started. This webinar is being recorded, so if any of your friends or colleagues miss out on this session, they can always follow the webinar through the recording. The recording will be up on India Alliance YouTube channel soon after the webinar. You can ask questions to the panelists or speakers anytime in the question box. You can type the questions in the question box on the console that is present on the right-hand side of your screen. In case the webinar ends abruptly due to any technical glitch, you can join back using the same registration link that you've used now. E-certificate will be provided at the end to only those who attend the entire webinar. Now, the agenda for today's webinar. The webinar today is divided into two sessions. Session 1 is about the Early Career Fellowship Scheme from India Alliance. This will be a talk from one of my colleagues at India Alliance for around from 5:30 to 5 p.m. as you can see on the screen, which will be followed by the question answer round. You can type your questions in during the talk in the question box on the right hand side. This will be followed by the session 2, where we have for you 2 India Alliance Early Career Fellows and a selection committee member to give you the perspective from the other side. This will again be followed by a question and answers. You can again type your questions in the question box on the right hand side. Now, without much ado, let me invite Madhavan, Senior Grants Advisor at India Alliance, who will take you through the Early Career Fellowship Scheme, especially in light of its remit, eligibility, provisions, requirements, and applications forms. Over to you, Madhavan.
Hi, Hina. Thank you for the introduction. Once again, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. The agenda for this webinar is to introduce everyone, all of you, to the Early Career Fellowship Scheme of Basic Biomedical Research stream of India Alliance, and to convince you that it's a worthwhile endeavor to apply for the India Alliance Fellowship. So I'm Madhavan. I'm a Senior Grants Advisor at India Alliance. I also act as the Secretary for the Early Career Fellowship Selection Committee. So India Alliance provides fellowships in different streams of biomedical research, both in basic biomedical research as well as clinical and public health research. For researchers at different stages of their careers, for those who have just completed their PhD and are planning to start launch an independent research career, we have the Early Career Fellowships. For those who have already established a research lab, independent research lab, and are at the initial stages of their independent research career, we have the intermediate fellowships. And for more established senior researchers, we have our senior fellowships. The focus of today's presentation is the Early Career Fellowship. Coming to the eligibility criteria of the Early Career Fellowship Scheme, or in short, the ECF scheme. So going ahead, I'll refer to this scheme as ECF, so don't get confused. So the Early Career Fellowship Scheme is envisaged as a mentored postdoctoral fellowship scheme that will aid our ECF Early Career Fellows to move into an independent research career. The researchers who have just completed their PhD, or who are in the last year of their PhD and up to 4 years of post-PhD research experience can apply for the Early Career Fellowship Scheme. That means that if you think we'll get to the timeline of the competition in the later stage of the presentation, but it takes about 10 months to from the launch to completion of the fellowship competition. So if you think that within this period you will be able to complete your PhD and have your Viva defense, then you can apply for your for the ECF program. And after your Viva, up to 4 years of research experience, you can apply. If you have had any periods of non-research break in your research career after completion of PhD, those periods of non-research will be discounted while calculating the eligibility. You should have pursued PhD in any discipline of science, but the proposed research should be within the remit of India Alliance, which is to support basic biomedical research that contributes to the welfare of humans or animals. So, for example, if your proposed research is in the area of plant science or mathematical modeling, that wouldn't be within the remit of India Alliance fellowships. You should also be prepared to pursue the fellowship if awarded at an Indian institution, an Indian not-for-profit institution. That is, if it's a private company or if it's a private hospital, you won't be eligible to apply. Or if you want to avail the fellowship at a foreign institution, that would also be not eligible. It should be a not-for-profit institution which is based in India. Most of the universities, colleges, medical colleges, etc. In India are not-for-profit. If you are not sure if your institution is eligible or not, or the institution where you plan to avail the fellowship is eligible to avail the India Alliance fellowship or not, please write to us and we will clarify your query. Coming to the key provisions of the Early Career Fellowship Scheme, the fellowship is for 5 years, and you can request budget up to a maximum amount of 1.7 crores Indian rupees. This would include for those people who do not have a faculty position or a permanent position at the planned host institution, a salary support of up to 10.36 lakhs per year. Along with this, you can also request for support of one technical staff, only one technical staff, that too starting from the second year of the fellowship. One unique provision of the ECF scheme is that you can plan or propose to spend up to 2 years abroad or in a lab outside of your host lab. We call this work outside host institution. This can be availed up to 2 years, and during this period, when you are spending time working outside your host institution, as part of the fellowship, in addition to the normal salary support or normal fellowship support that you will get, you can also we will also be providing a subsistence allowance of up to $3,000 per month, and a travel allowance to go to the lab overseas of up to 1,50,000 one-time amount. However, this overseas subsistence allowance and overseas travel allowance will be available only if the applicant proposes to avail the work outside host institution provision in a lab outside of India. If you're if you're going to avail this facility in a lab within India, you can still ask for subsistence allowance, but it will be in a different head. In addition to these, we also provide a total amount of 7.5 lakhs for the 5-year period to travel to a collaborator's lab or to go register for conferences, and as this is called the travel allowance. And then we have a contingency allowance of 2.5 lakhs for the 5-year duration. One of the key requirements of the early career fellowship scheme is the time commitment requirement. For those applicants who do not have a faculty position, they have to commit to spend 100% of their research time on the proposed India Alliance funded research work. But if you have a faculty position at the proposed host institution, you have to spend at least 90% of your research time. And if you have any non-research related activities such as teaching or administrative work, the fellows should commit to spend no more than 2 hours per week on non-research activities. This is to ensure that our fellows, our early career fellows, get as much time as they need to focus on their research. So, coming to the timeline of the fellowship competition, the fellowship starts with a preliminary application where we request a short CV and summary of the proposed research from the applicant. These preliminary applications are then screened to shortlist the most competitive applications, who are then invited to submit a full application. If you are shortlisted to submit full application for the India Alliance Early Career Fellowship Scheme, it is important to keep in mind our resubmission policy. As per this policy, if you submit the full application and it goes through the review process, peer review and the committee review process, you will not be eligible to apply for the same scheme again. So if you submit a full application for early career fellowship and it goes through peer review and then gets declined without getting awarded, then you will not be eligible to apply again for the early career fellowship scheme. So it is very important to consider where you are, at what stage you are in your career, if your proposed research is competitive or not, because you only get one chance to compete in this for this fellowship. So once we receive the full applications, they go through international peer review and also reviewed by our selection committee to shortlist applicants for the interview. The interviews are generally physical, where the applicant has to come and present themselves before the interview panel and defend their research. And from among the interviewed applicants, the best are awarded the fellowship, which has a fixed activation fixed activation date in the next year, January 1st of the next year. So for the current round of competition, if you are awarded, you can activate your fellowship on 1st January of 2022. And if you go through the interview stage and are awarded our fellowship, it's important to bear in mind the dual fellowship policy of India Alliance. As per this policy, you are allowed to hold only one fellowship throughout the duration of the India Alliance fellowship. That is, if you are awarded India Alliance fellowship and decide to avail the fellowship, then you will not be eligible to apply for any other fellowship during the entire 5-year duration. Also, if you already have a fellowship, such as the NPDF or Inspire fellowship, at the time of activating the fellowship, you will have to decide if you want to continue with that fellowship or activate your India Alliance fellowship. So we are very particular about this policy. So what are the requirements? What all are the participants' different roles in the application? So The most important role in the application is that of the lead applicant, which is whoever wants to avail the fellowship. At the preliminary application stage, we also require the details of a fellowship supervisor. This will be the person who will directly supervise the proposed research, and in whose lab the proposed research will be conducted. This person should have a contract of employment for the entire 5-year duration of the fellowship at the proposed host institution in India. Along with the fellowship supervisor, and during the preliminary application, the fellowship supervisor will have to provide a letter of support agreeing to be part of the application. Along with the fellowship supervisor in the preliminary application, we will also need at least one recommendation letter from a person who knows the applicant in a professional capacity and who can comment upon the research training of the applicant. If the application gets shortlisted to the full application stage, we will also require the details of the sponsor at the host institution, who will undertake to provide the required amenities for the applicant at the host institution, and the sponsor will have to sign up to the award conditions of India Alliance. Usually the sponsor is an administrative authority at the host institution, like a head of the department or director of the institution or vice chancellor of a university, etc. The role of sponsor, providing the name of a sponsor, is mandatory at the full application stage. It is possible that the fellowship supervisor can also be the sponsor if the proposed fellowship supervisor has that kind of administrative authority at the proposed host institution. Along with sponsor, another mandatory role in the full application stage is the mentor. It is mandatory that at least one mentor, this can be a senior researcher either in the proposed host institution or outside the proposed host institution, anywhere in the world, who agrees to provide scientific and intellectual mentorship and inputs into the research of the India Alliance awardee. So it is mandatory that there should be at least one mentor who agrees to provide a letter of support along with the full application. Along with this, if you are proposing to avail the work outside host institution option, you have to also provide information about an external sponsor who will host you in their lab during the work outside host institution duration. You may also provide details of any collaborators who might help you with providing samples or providing any other research support. The roles of external sponsor and collaborator are not mandatory either in the preliminary application or full application, but if you propose their names, they will have to provide a letter of support, otherwise the application will be considered incomplete. So what are the requirements in the application? As I said earlier, preliminary application consists of the applicant's CV, a short summary of up to 750 words of the proposed research work, letters of support from the proposed fellowship supervisor, and at least one recommendation letter. In the full application, if the preliminary application is shortlisted to the full application, we will require the applicant to provide a more detailed research proposal of up to 2,800 words, a budget proposal. As I mentioned earlier, it's a maximum of up to 1.7 crore rupees, including the salary of the awardee and the institutional overheads, which would be about 10% of the total cost. The cost requested can be consumables, access charges to access instruments in some other lab or some other instrument in some other institution. If you want to work with animals, you can request costs for purchasing and maintaining animals. You can also request costs for doing any other miscellaneous costs which are allowed as per India Alliance's costing policies. These policies are available on our website. We advise you to visit our website and acquaint yourself with our costing and award policies if you plan to apply for India Alliance Fellowship. Along with the budget and research proposal, we'll also need information about the sponsor, and the proposed host institution, letters of support from collaborators, mentors, external sponsors, and details of any human or animal experiments that you might plan to do. So why should you apply for India Alliance Fellowship? Why is it, as I said at the beginning, why is it a very useful endeavor to apply for India Alliance Fellowship? What we provide is a very unique, a flexible and generous funding scheme. We have two heads of funds if you are awarded: ring fence funds, which include salaries, overheads, institutional overheads, and overseas allowance. And the second is the transferable funds, which can be used as per the applicant awardees, as per India Alliance Fellows needs. So we do not insist on using the funds as it is proposed in the application. We also, while calculating the eligibility, as I mentioned earlier, we give due consideration to any periods of research breaks. This will be a very useful provision for female applicants who have had a break in their career due to maternity or other reasons. We also do not have any restriction based on age or nationality. We only look at the eligibility criteria, and we only insist that you avail the fellowship inside India. You can be from anywhere in the world. The emphasis in scrutinizing and evaluating the application, the primary importance is to the lead applicant and his or her competitiveness. And throughout the application process, the office as well as the peer reviewers and the selection committee provide continued feedback to the applicant. So even if your application gets declined, we provide you with scientific feedback that might help you in revising your research proposal for some other grant application or fellowship application. We also don't insist that the applicant have a salaried or a committed position at the proposed host institution. As I mentioned earlier, we provide salary support to anyone who doesn't have a position at the host institution. We also encourage those who are planning to pursue interdisciplinary research, and we also provide opportunities to establish international collaborations through our work outside host institution provision. As I said earlier, the applications go through international peer review, and the scientific feedback received from this review process is shared with the applicant, even if the application gets declined without getting awarded. And we use an online application processing platform called ISS, which is secure and user friendly. This makes your process of applying to our fellowships very convenient. These are some of the deadlines or timelines for the current round of competition. The current round was launched on 13th of July, and we are accepting preliminary applications till 11th August, 2 p.m. Indian Standard Time. If after scrutinizing, if your application is shortlisted, we will communicate with you and request you to submit a full application during October 2020. And if this application goes through shortlisting stage, the interview will be in May, June of 2021. And as I said earlier, the awardees can activate their fellowship in January of 2022. So how do you apply for the India Alliance Fellowship? As I said, it has to be through our online grants management system, ISS. Please visit our website. There is a link to access the ISS on our homepage. Please register. If you have already got registered and you already have an account, you can log in and complete the application. If you do not have, if you're a new user, register and complete your profile, and you can submit the application. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take.
Thank you, Madhavan. That was immensely helpful and a very comprehensive presentation. We already have questions pouring in our inbox, and I would request you to take one which is very common regarding early career fellowship, which is whether a person can apply for the fellowship in a lab or host institute, which was the one for his PhD, his or her PhD.
That's a very good question. We at India Alliance encourage the applicants to move out of their comfort zone and explore new territories, new research questions, and new research environment. So it is highly recommended that you do not continue in the lab or under the supervision of your PhD supervisor. But if you have a very strong reason to continue in the same lab or under the same supervisor, you can provide that information in the preliminary application, and we will consider and take an appropriate decision.
Yeah, thank you. The next question, which is again being asked by many people, is that if somebody already has a faculty position at an institute, can he or she apply for ECF? And the converse, if the person gets awarded with ECF, can the person accept a faculty position later on?
Again, a very good question. As I said during the presentation, we do not insist that a person have a faculty position. We do not penalize either that if you have a faculty position. Only requirement is you should not have more than 4 years of post PhD research experience. If you have a salaried faculty position, and if the salary, your current salary is higher than 10.36 lakhs per year that we provide to our fellows, the money that would normally go to the salary can be used for research. If your salary is lower than our support for our early career fellows, we will provide a top up to match the cap that we have for our early career fellows salary. Similarly, if you get a faculty position during our while availing India Alliance fellowship, we encourage you to do that. And there is no bar on our fellows applying for faculty position. There have been several fellows in the past who got faculty positions after getting an India Alliance fellowship.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that, Madhavan. The next question is, I have recognized a mentor from India, but do I have to provide the name of the mentor from abroad at prelim stage?
As mentioned during the presentation, we only require information about the fellowship supervisor in India, in whose lab the fellowship research work will be conducted. Details of the overseas mentor or external sponsor in whose lab work outside host institution will be availed need not be provided in the preliminary application. These information will be required only in the full application stage if shortlisted. Again, to emphasize, in addition to the fellowship supervisor's letter, we also require an additional recommendation letter from a previous supervisor or a previous collaborator who can comment on your research training.
Yeah. So now, since you have mentioned the letter of recommendation, we also have a question whether this can be from someone who's not the PhD supervisor.
Yes, if the person has known you in a professional capacity and can comment on your research training, you are welcome to provide that person's letter from that person. Also, I would like to add that there is a minimum requirement of 1 letter. You can provide as many letters as you want.
Okay. Now the next one is from someone who's joined an industry in R&D sector after PhD and then later join in academia as postdoc. Can this person apply for ECF? And maybe
Yes,
the question is whether the industry experience would count or not.
Yes, if you were actively performing research work during your employment at the industry or at the company, it would count towards research experience. However, you can't continue or avail India Alliance fellowship at the company at an industry. You will have to do it at a not-for-profit institution, that too within India.
Yeah, thank you. Now the next question is, suppose I get shortlisted in the preliminary application, but for some reason cannot apply for the full application in the same round. Will I be able to apply for the fellowship in the next cycle?
If you do not submit the full application after being shortlisted at preliminary application stage, you're welcome to apply in the next competition round, provided you fulfill the eligibility criteria. That is, you do not complete 4 years of post-PhD experience. However, you will have to start from the preliminary application stage again. So your shortlisting for this year's round will not carry over to the next year's round. So you will have to start from the beginning again.
Okay. Now someone's saying, I've worked in the proposed host lab as a research associate for 2 years already. Can I still apply for a fellowship in this lab?
It is possible. If it is not the applicant's PhD lab, it is possible to apply. Again, as I said, we encourage our applicants to explore new territories, new research areas. But if you have a strong reason to continue in the same lab, you can provide that information in the preliminary application, and the office will consider and take a call on that.
Okay.
It depends on how strong your reason is.
Yes. This is my first grant application. Can India Alliance office help with formulating a budget?
We do not provide any specific input on how to prepare a budget. We advise the applicants to coordinate with their proposed fellowship supervisors or mentors in preparing, in deciding their research needs and preparing the budget.
Okay. So I'm still looking for collaborators. Should I provide the details in the preliminary application stage, or can I add them at a later stage?
Yes, the information about any collaborators is required only at the full application stage. We do not require information about collaborators or mentors in the preliminary application. Only the details of a fellowship supervisor and consequently the host institution will be required.
Okay. Can my external sponsor also be my mentor on the fellowship application?
That's a very good question. Except for the fellowship supervisor, anyone else, any other role on the application can also be the mentor. That is, external sponsor or collaborator, or the person who gave the recommendation letter. Any of them can be a mentor also. Only the fellowship supervisor cannot be included in the application as a mentor also.
Okay, and on this note, we have a question which asks, can you define very clearly the difference between a supervisor and a mentor?
Yes, I hope when you say supervisor, it is fellowship supervisor.
Yes.
The fellowship supervisor is the person in whose lab you will be performing the proposed research work, and who will be responsible for providing day-to-day guidance in your research work. This person will also be the one who will be assessing your progress and things like that. A mentor will be somebody who need not be in the same institute or in the same lab even. This can be a senior researcher from anywhere in the world who agrees to provide intellectual input. That is, who will look at your data and who will look at your experimental schemes and give you input on how to plan your next steps and things like that. This person need not be associated with you on a day-to-day basis. They can interact with you periodically and review your research progress.
Okay, thank you, Madhavan. I do not have plans for work outside host institution right now. Can I request for it after being awarded the fellowship?
Unfortunately, it is not allowed. As I mentioned a little earlier, overseas allowance, which is provided for those who are planning to avail work outside host institution, is part of the ring-fenced funds. So it can't be used for any other purpose. So it has to be requested at the beginning in the application itself. You cannot request for work outside host institution at a later stage after being awarded the fellowship.
Okay. Can fellowship be transferred to another institution in the middle of the tenure of the fellowship?
It is possible, but it is you will have to provide a very strong justification, and it has to be approved by our selection committee, because the proposed host environment is also one of the criteria which is judged while evaluating the application. If you have really compelling justification to change the host institution, the office may consider the request, but it is not given that the request will be entertained, or the request will be approved. It has to have a very strong justification, but we strongly encourage our applicants to choose a host institution where they undertake the entire 5 years of the fellowship in the same place, because as I said, it is not given that an approval for change of host institution will be coming through.
Okay. And maybe the last question that we are taking for now, can I suggest or restrict reviewers on my application?
Yes, the applicants have the option of either suggesting reviewers, or if they have a strong reason for excluding a competitor or a particular person from reviewing the application or looking at the contents, we will respect their suggestion, and they can provide information about that person in the full application.
Okay. Thank you, Madhuvan. Thank you for the comprehensive presentation and taking all the questions so well. I would like to request our audience to drop any more questions to our inbox, the info@indiaalliance.org. You may also ask some questions at the end of session 2. For now, we begin with the session 2. Session 2 is meant to give you a perspective from India Alliance Early Career Fellows, those who have already been awarded, and a selection committee member. For this, we have with us today Masum Saini from RCB Faridabad, the Regional Center for Biotechnology, and Hannah Mary Thomas from CMC Vellore. Professor Sandhya Koushika is going to perspective of PCS selection committee member. Now, before we begin with Masum's presentation, a quick Masum studied zoology during her bachelor's program, and sustained interest in life sciences. Pardon me for a minute. I think there's an echo in my audio. Yeah. So, quick introduction to Masum. May I request Yukti from India Alliance to help us, and request all of you to please bear with us for a minute.
Now, thank you. So we have with us Dr. Masum Saini from Regional Center for Biotechnology, Faridabad. Masum studied zoology during her bachelor's program and completed her master's in genetics. Her sustained interest in life sciences led her to pursue PhD at the National Institute of Immunology, New Delhi. Masum is currently a young investigator at RCB Faridabad and was awarded India Alliance Early Career Fellowship in the year 2018. With that, I'll request Masum to share her advices, suggestions, comments, her experience with us. So over to you, Masum.
Hello.
Yes, Masum,
Hello.
we can hear you well. Yes, Masum, we can hear you well.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. And I'd like to thank Hina and Yukti for the short introduction, and also Madhavan for walking us all through the process of ECF and highlighting the salient features of the fellowship. I think most of those that he has highlighted were the primary reasons why I applied for this fellowship. And as we all know, it is one of the most prestigious fellowships, both nationally and internationally. And also, it is quite competitive for that very reason that it is prestigious, and it challenges one's scientific potential to the core. So that is one of the reasons, because it involves a substantial amount of fund that India Alliance provides the fellows, and therefore they want to see scientific merit not only in the fellow but also in the questions that they're proposing. Also, there's the amount of funding that India Alliance provides. It comes with an added advantage of being extremely flexible. That is, it is not just how and when you can use those funds. It is always, you can, depending on your requirement and how your work is shaping up, you could always write to them. And if your request is reasonably justifiable, they can reallocate funds to whatever your needs are at the moment, so that your work doesn't get stalled. So this is one of the best features that I liked on the Wellcome Fellowship. Also, a very valuable component is the work outside host institute, because it gives a chance to many homegrown researchers like me to go explore abroad and look at the scientific culture and way the science is done abroad. Also, I think it is the ethos of India Alliance, where it emphasizes on building collaborations and networks, both of which are very fundamental to scientific research in academia. And also, hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
Hello.
Yes, you are.
All right. And there is a very elaborate feedback mechanism. As Madhavan already highlighted, there is continuous feedback throughout the application process and even thereafter, and which is really helpful, because it helps you not only plan your writing process, the way you're going to define your grant, and even after you get the fellowship, you're recommended for the fellowship, there are periodic review meetings. You have reviews from the mentors and your supervisor, which help you keep on track with your proposed project. And the best thing that I liked about the ECF and India Alliance was the seamless support. So at no stage of my fellowship or the application stage did I feel left out. Right from the mentors to grant managers to the grant advisors and the finance and the admin staff at India Alliance were really or are still really very helpful. And the take home message here, for one of the main reasons to apply for this fellowship, is the flexibility that it gives the fellow, not only in terms of the science that they do, but also how they do it, and the immense visibility that it provides to a fellow in the scientific circles, nationally and internationally. Now, in the next couple of minutes, in next few minutes, Dr. Sandhya will be talking more about writing and defending your grant, ECF grant. But I'd like to share my experiences here. For me, it was a really engaging process, and it was actually very rigorous. I feel I have not come across, because I've heard from other colleagues who have applied for other fellowships, and the process is most rigorous with the ECF. It happens in a structured manner. So there is as we all know, there's a preliminary stage, there's a full application, and then you have the interview stage. So in each of these stages, as you are progressing, you are developing, not only do you formulate your question, but you also keep refining it with added inputs. Maybe many of us like to add preliminary data, and that is what shapes it up so well that by the time of the interview, you are so well able to and so confident about your question that you were able to defend it very well. Secondly, it gives you a lot of insights, or teaches you how to formulate a very valid scientific question, write that question out and communicate it very succinctly, and put it across to the reviewers. It also involves one to develop meticulous planning skills as to how for the next 5 years you're going to plan all your experiments. So Wellcome requires us to kind of give timelines as to when we expect particular milestones to be achieved, so which is very helpful because it also facilitates self-assessment. Secondly, throughout the fellowship, a valuable aspect has been the expert evaluation that we get not only at the India Alliance Fellows meets, but also from the mentor whom we choose on our, or who consents to be our mentor on the fellowship. And that is very valuable because that person is from the field, your supervisor is providing you feedback. So it kind of, even any course correction that is required during the fellowship, that becomes very much possible right when you are getting into territory that shouldn't or that is not requires you to be there. So again, another part of the application process that I really liked was the supportive processes at the India Alliance. And not only was it with the grant writing, my grant advisor was really helpful. And even at the interview stage when I went, I remember very categorically that the staff there who was supposed to attend to each of the fellows is so comforting and so warm that, in those moments when someone is nervous, they could really cool you down, and so that you're able to go in and present yourself really well. So basically, writing and defending the ECF really helps you evolve and develop grantsmanship skills. And believe me, as an independent researcher in the future, anyone would, require these valuable skills. Now, having written and defended your grant, if you've got the award, you are lucky. And certainly it gives you a sense of accomplishment. Not only does it give you this, but also it immediately kicks in a sense of responsibility that you have, that the funders have put so much of trust and so much of money, the taxpayers' money on you. And so you have to, look into the fact that you do proper self-assessments, you are on the right path during your fellowship. And you can, having gone through this rigorous process of planning, putting in timelines, putting in budgeting, you actually hit the ground running once you get the award. So it's like you just have to start, in my case, it was like I could start ordering reagents immediately. The funds came to me. And the fund also, I feel that the fund varied science is what is very important, like right from people who are doing studying music and its impact on neuropsychology, and people who are doing artificial intelligence, to people who are doing basic molecular biology. So there is no pre-biased notions that this particular kind of research would get funding. Secondly, there is a very streamlined guidance and support process even with the initiation of the award once you are awarded, and after that, during as you progress with your fellowship. So getting the award in itself is a very validating feeling, and it encourages you to be in science and do something worthwhile. Now, having gotten the award, certainly one would feel that how does one feel as you progress on the ECF. So since I'm almost more than over 2 years down my fellowship, I'd like to share that I totally feel that it is a really helpful learning opportunity for me, because it kind of has taught me how to, keep my budget in check, where not to spend, how much to spend. Secondly, I'll be recruiting a technical help, so I'll be mentoring that person. And in a way, it will also teach me how to mentor students, so that when I have my own research group or set up my research group, I know how to go about, mentoring people.
Masum,
Again,
sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah. Tell me.
Request you to please wrap up in a minute.
Yes. So you basically, all of this helps you develop a diverse skill set and gives you immense scientific exposure. Again, I think the underlying feature is the flexibility and support that the India Alliance provides. So career progression is only going to set you on the path to independence. And here I would like to thank India Alliance and all its staff for just being the wind beneath my wings and helping me achieve what I think I will like to do in the future, to be a researcher, a science researcher. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening to me.
Unmuted.
Thank you for that very insightful and helpful presentation, Masum. May I also mention here that Masum works with Dr. Sam Matthew at the Regional Center for Biotechnology. Sam has been an intermediate fellow with India Alliance. Moving on to our next guest, Hannah Mary Thomas. Hannah has a bachelor's and master's in physics. For her PhD, she worked on oncology imaging at the Vellore Institute of Technology with academic supervision from CMC Vellore. After a postdoctoral stint at the University of Washington, she is now an India Alliance Early Career Fellow at CMC Vellore. Over to you, Hannah.
Thank you so much, Hina. I hope everybody can hear me. So I'm going to, like mentioned, I'm awarded from this year. So I'm just going to walk through my experience with the application process, starting from the preliminary to the initiation of the award. So like it was mentioned by Madhavan in his talk, the preliminary application opens up, but your grant start date is actually only in 2 years' time. So it was very important for me to set that timing in place. At that time I was a little bit apprehensive in applying, thinking that I was already a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Washington, and I wasn't sure if I had all the skill sets required to put in an application at that time. So that's when my postdoc supervisor sat me down and he explained, if you are awarded, your grant is going to start in 2020, and you still have time to be the postdoctoral fellow and to also learn the skills that you want to take it to your own lab in India. So that got me moving. Also, I had done a little bit of homework in finding out what is the scope, what is the remit of the fellowship, and I found that it is within the remit of India Alliance to um, apply. So I was planning, and I am right now what I'm doing is to use machine learning in medical imaging for a clinical question. So this was within the remit of the application. So that helped me put in my preliminary application. At that point, I wasn't sure if I will make it through to the full application stage. But once the full application stage a call for had come, then it required me to do a lot more of the planning, because I was doing a full-time postdoc, but it also required me to put in a lot more planning for this application. I knew that I had only one chance, and I really so badly wanted it, and I wanted to come back to India, and I had to give in um, so much to the proposal itself to make it to look what it was at the end. So today when I went back and checked, I had 27 drafts of my proposal before it went in for the full application. So it also required me to give a lot of thought to the host institution if the question that I was proposing was in line with what they wanted to support. I also had to find mentors, because it was a extremely interdisciplinary space that I was venturing into. So I was leaving medical imaging, only the imaging part of it, and trying to bring that as a workflow into the clinical realm. So I had to find mentors who were willing to pitch for this idea. So it was like a give and take, where they had to bring in a lot of feedback. They gave me enough inputs, and all of that made for a very good a comprehensive full application process. When I mention about the planning, it also is important that I mentioned that there are so many other categories, questions within the application process itself, that requires you to think about why you want to do it, why you should be doing it, why did you choose this host institution. You had to justify. So it was like a cathartic process where you're peeling out all of the peripheries, and you're actually getting an insight into your own self, into your own proposal, and what you want to do for the next 5 years. And once I made it to the interview stage, I knew that, you know, it is highly competitive. There's no way that, you know, I know that I'm going to make it. So what I did was to have multiple mock interviews with people. So what I did was to have 6 mock interviews. Two were with fellows who had already been awarded. One was an early career fellow, one was a senior fellow, just to get a perspective of what they found at the interview that they wanted to share. Each one's experience was unique, but I had something to anticipate. I also had 2 mock interviews with people who sit on the committees. One was a person from UK who sits on the Wellcome Committee, and somebody from both DBT and India Alliance. So both of them gave me a perspective as to what the interviewers are looking for at the interview stage. And I had 2 full panel interview mock sessions with my lab in University of Washington, because they wanted to prep me for that final day where, you know, you're sitting, you have so many people interviewing you on that day, where you shouldn't feel flustered. And, you know, I think the mock interviews were far more intense and rigorous than the actual interview itself. And like Masum mentioned, I think what stood out particularly about the India Alliance process, application process, was the rapport that we were able to build with each of our grant supervisors from preliminary stage till initiation of the grant, and it still continues while we are awardees. So on the day of the interview, I still remember I was the first candidate and I was so nervous, and the grant advisor who was looking after that session just came up to me and said, relax, you will be fine. And then I walk in and the panel was so welcoming and encouraging. It was, I think it was one of my best interview experiences. They were not trying to be intimidating or trying to make me feel small. I felt the committee was rooting for me. They actually wanted to see young people succeed. So I think that was a very, very unique experience. And I'm really excited to be an India Alliance Fellow. Well, at the initiation of the grant, I would say, I started in January, the paperwork started in January, and before the end of the month, the funds were released. And even during these difficult times where there's a lot of uncertainty, India Alliance still makes sure that they have our backs. They continue to communicate with us. Our grant advisors continue to keep us posted with things. So I think it has been a wonderful experience for me. Only one limitation I found during the application process was that I couldn't find any example applications to fall back on. So I was taking a grant writing class, and we had to fall back on an R01 grant or a K award grant because we didn't have any example India Alliance application. So I think that was the only small limitation I would say. But other than that, I have enjoyed so far my association with India Alliance. So I'm happy to take any questions at the end. If anybody has any questions, you can also reach out to me on the email shown here.
Thank you, Hannah. Another wonderful presentation for today. I'm sure our audiences have questions for Masum and Hannah. We should take these after the next talk on grant writing by Professor Sandhya Koushika. Now, Professor Sandhya does not need an introduction, but I would still go ahead and give a quick one. She's an Indian neuroscientist currently working at the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, Mumbai. Her main area of interest is regulation of axonal transport within nerve cells. Sandhya earned her BSc and MSc degrees from MS University at Baroda and received her PhD in cellular and molecular biology from Brandeis University. Her postdoctoral training was at Washington University, and she's a recipient of International Early Career Award by HHMI USA. Prior to her current appointment at TIFR Mumbai, she was a faculty at the National Center for Biological Sciences, Bangalore. Sandhya is a member of the Early Career Fellowship Selection Committee at India Alliance and will now take today's session on effective grant writing. Please join me in welcoming Sandhya. Over to you.
Thank you for sharing my presentation. And I think, you know, a lot of what I had planned to say has been said by the prior two speakers. But nonetheless, I think I will go through what some of the key things that I think are important, which has come from my experience for the past 3 rounds in where I've read grants for this scheme. So let's start off with the first slide, which is writing a good proposal, 1 of 3. The first thing that you do need to think about is excellent objectives. Ask yourself, what is the question or set of questions that you want to answer? Why is that important? And what answering those objectives will do to this field that you have chosen to work in. Typically, you will have about 3, at most 4 objectives. And something to keep in mind is don't propose too much, but don't propose too little. One simple rule of thumb over here is to think about time. You have 5 years and you have to set aside some time to get your papers out. So what can you accomplish in those 5 years, which would be valuable to the field and sort of exciting to you? You can pick any sort of problems. Some problems like, they do fund ecology and things of that nature which intersect with human health. So you can pick a problem right there to going all the way to basic cellular and molecular questions. There is absolutely, as one of the prior speakers said, there's no limits on what are the kinds of things that ECF funds as long as it fits under the remit of India Alliance. But whatever you pick a nice balance of doable and risky. You don't want to spend 5 years getting no data, which you can weave into a story. But at the same time, you don't want to do a proposal in which you're just taking the next very obvious small step. So that balance would be nice to get if you can. What is nice when you read a proposal, and I'm saying this from the point of view of a reviewer, is if you describe the experimental design and give a little bit of detail about what you're exactly doing. So let me give you an example here. Nobody needs to know what RT-PCR is, right? But if if there is one particular assay, which might be a complex assay, maybe a routine assay, one would still like to know what you're going to compare to what are your controls going to be, and therefore, what is the real data set that you're going to finally get, which you analyze. So a little bit of design description and detail is very, very useful. Otherwise, those questions will be asked during your interview. And instead, you can sort of put that in your proposal. There's often questions about preliminary data. What I would suggest is the following. It's obviously not essential, especially if you have not even joined the lab that you're going to do work in. It's not a given that you will have preliminary data in the kinds of questions that you're proposing. Although it is certainly within the realm of possibility that your postdoctoral lab or your fellowship supervisor in the lab might have some preliminary data. But if you have been in the lab, and there are many fellows, many fellowship applicants who also have spent some time in the lab, then it would be nice to have a small bit of preliminary data, which sort of give reviewers, can convince your reviewers about the merit of your grant, and especially if it's something very challenging, which has not been done before, you've sort of put out there a little bit of data saying that, hey, I can get this done, and this is really interesting. And it's not going to be a problem. I'll be able to proceed in this line of experimentation. But no worries if you don't have it. Okay, so let me emphasize that. If we go to the second slide of writing a good grant proposal, 2 of 3, something that is very, very useful to keep in mind when you write your proposal and to make sure it's included is things of the nature of, if you're using animals, you have to have a sense of what the variability is. Have you done a power calculation? If you're getting human samples, have you written, how you're going to access those samples to do whatever experimentation that you're going to do? Do you have a letter saying that this, if it is not coming from within your lab or within your institution, you still need a letter if it's coming from somebody else within the institution or from some other institution, that they will give you access to those samples. Data analysis. If you have the skills, that's great. You bring those skills to the table. You have prior track record of having those skills. But if you do not have those skills, let us say you're a bench scientist and you suddenly have one component of your research proposal where you have to do a lot of bioinformatic analysis. Where is that expertise going to come from? Who are you going to collaborate or learn from, whether within or outside the institution? All of those details are important to put in. There will be different places to put it in, because if it's a collaborator, you will have a collaborator letter, but that is important. Likewise, I think all of us recognize, since there is a reproducibility crisis in a lot of research that's been coming out for a while, that statistical tests are going to be important. It's going to be very important to say that you have thought through all of the aspects of your research, including data presentation and data analysis. So give it the respect that this deserves, because this is, again, very, very important for getting a piece of work done cleanly with conclusions that stand the test of time. I want to add something which occasionally comes up. It's gotten better in the 3 years that I've done. I have been sort of reviewing proposals. Please reference the latest current literature. And if there are papers in your area which sort of run counter to what you're proposing or have an alternate view of, how you are thinking about the biological problem, do not exclude it from mention in your proposal. Say that there are these alternate views. Here's the latest reference that comes from here. And nonetheless, you believe X to be the better hypothesis to follow. This is very important to do, because actually it gives the committee confidence that you are well aware of the entire area of research, the complexity that exists, and you have considered multiple points of view, and there's a rationale why you have chosen one particular defined hypothesis or a rationale to proceed. And this, please do not shut that door. That's really important. Some proposals, sometimes you just want to say that this is the only thing which supports my data and I'm going to ignore the rest. I think not doing that would actually stand to benefit you as a person who's a developing scientist. Now, if we go to the third slide of writing a good proposal, Yukti, can you switch the slide, please? Thank you. So I think what you already heard from the prior to ECF fellows and also from Madhavan, that the grant proposal has many parts, not just your research proposal and budget. Yes, those are critical and the biggest parts of it. And let me tell you, those other parts take a lot of time to fill and do well. And they're all read. Many, many hours. The most, I can speak for myself, but I can also speak for a couple of other people whom I know who are on the committee. We spend an enormous amount of time reading the entire proposal, which is, 20, 30 pages long with all the documentation that comes in. Okay, so please give the other parts of your proposal also sufficient time to fill in correctly. Okay. Now, I think this has been said many times, especially by the previous speaker, get feedback. That means you must start early. You must take the time to write a good proposal. Sometimes you need to tune your, your objectives multiple times to refine them. get feedback both from people who are within your field, which would be your fellowship supervisor, maybe other people who are your collaborators, but also get feedback from people who are outside the field. And if you're lucky enough and you can arm twist some friends or even your spouse or your parent who's not a biologist, ask them to cast an eye on it. Essentially, what you need, apart from the scientific sculpting of the research proposal, you also need to emphasize readability. Are your sentences and are your ideas communicated with clarity? Please don't use extremely small font or extremely, closely spaced lines. That's all part of it. And you have a logical flow of ideas. And does that mean that you have one set of objectives? How does that first set of objectives and getting data from it lead to your second set of objectives and lead to your third set of objectives, right? And that would really then give you a large body of solid piece of work, which would be very, very valuable to the field. So it's good to get that kind of feedback, and that means it takes time. As I said this already, people outside your field should understand your proposal. Why is this important? The ECF committee, if you've looked at the composition and it's on their website, you see it's a diverse group of people. Not all of them are in your area, but all of them are in the interview. Any of those members can ask you a question when you are being interviewed, and therefore having that clarity and good flow of ideas is very, very valuable. Okay, so let me repeat this once more. Give people enough time to give thoughtful comments and for you to make the necessary revisions. Because if people have given a lot of thoughtful comments, it typically takes quite a while to sort of incorporate all of that, to think about the suggestions and incorporate them into your proposal. You also need to give your PI, collaborators, and mentors to get their letters and supporting documents organized. So one primary thing is start early, give yourself time to go through the process so you can then enjoy the entire process of putting a scientific proposal together, have good grasp of the research area, including multiple ideas which may run counter to each other. Okay. Can we go to the next slide, please? It is important to think about the environment that you're going to end up in, which is both the PI and the host institution. Is the PI someone you feel comfortable and excited working with? Is the lab a wonderful place for you to, take your independent steps in your career? And the institution a place which is vibrant and active and a place where you expect to grow scientifically? It is always nice to have a plan for independence and understand how your work fits into the larger picture of the lab as well as the scientific area. And for that, the immediate lab environment and the environment of the institution does matter. The PI's input is, of course, important for developing a good proposal, and I imagine there will be a lot of back and forth, but throughout the entire 5 years, you will find that the entire community, which is built around the PI, the lab, and the institution, are going to be valuable for you. And you need to spend some time thinking about what is the kind of place that you want to end up in. And for that, it's valuable to know 4 or 5 years down the road, what do you plan to do, right? And then you can pick the right environment for that. At least have, the beginnings of a plan. One thing to note, although you have generous funding, that is not the kind of money that you get from India Alliance is not going to allow you to build an animal house, for instance, or buy an ultracentrifuge or a confocal. So for all major infrastructure need to be present and functioning well in the host institution. And you should evaluate that as well. One thing which is I always tell, which is a good thing for young people to consider, and also this feeds into giving the PI sufficient time, And one thing that shows up often in letters is, has the PI thought about you, your proposal, and how they will help you achieve your goals and mentor you towards it? So this is important, obviously, because for you to succeed, the person who mentors you has also got to invest time and effort in mentoring. Okay, so beyond that, let's go to the next slide, which talks about travel and collaboration. As you already know, this is very nicely described by Madhavan as to, how that money comes, how it can be used. Typically, there are two types of international collaboration that I have seen. One is technique-driven, that is, they have access to a particular technique or particular set of instruments, and they are happy to host you and try your samples. Or sometimes it's problem-driven, and you say, no, I'm going to do it in this system, but these people have a slightly different system of doing it, and I want to do it in that paradigm as well. Both are fine, as long as you can justify it and your collaborator is willing to support you. Those work. Plan these well, because these can be combined with attending good meetings. And during your 5 years, please always think about this is a step towards independence. And if you use it well, then I think what you get out of the fellowship will be much better. Out of the fellowship be much better. I'm not sure why I'm having echo, but if somebody has their mic unmuted, please mute them. What you'll get out of the fellowship is much more than just your research and some papers, because I think it would be nice if a lot of our ACF fellows go on to have strong scientific careers, and if they start sort of doing small bits of planning around this while they're doing their research and bench science, I think they can be extremely successful. I mean, I've been very impressed with the people who have come through the committees, and sometimes it's been very hard to decide who to fund and who not to fund. Can we move to the next slide, which is the budget? I think you heard a great deal about the budget, so I won't go through it much more. One thing I will say is ask for what you need, but remember that this takes place in the context of what is available, so it's good for you to know what is available. And if you sort of see that you're running out of, you're writing your budget and you're running out of money, and you don't have space to do everything, then you go back and look at your aims and say, am I proposing too much? Should I be thinking about it differently? I have asked for too many samples. Should I be spending, where is it that I need to sort of see, instead of scrunching the proposal such that you don't achieve your objectives? If you're going to run out of money, you'll take a deep look at what you're proposing and what your samples are, and can you achieve the same thing by using, money in a way it fits into whatever is the budget. But usually this has not been an issue, I should say, in terms of any of the proposals that I have reviewed, or most of them that I have reviewed. Okay, if we go to the next, and I think this would interest a lot of people, what is looked for when an applicant comes to us? And you have to realize that for the committee to see the applicant, they have already passed through the first preliminary selection, and their grants have gone out for review, for international review, and have come back. So we are looking at, the committee is looking at the applicant after that point of time. Right? So I'll tell you a couple of things which help. Consistent productivity helps. You do not have to worry about whether you have nature or science papers, but consistent productivity does help. High quality productivity, if you have very high impact papers, that's fine too. Of course, that's very good, but consistency is looked for. Good letters are nice to see, but neither of these is a substitute for a good proposal. So you could have fantastic papers, you could have great letters, But if you have not written a good proposal and you cannot defend it well, then it's going to be a disappointing step forward. Okay, so I felt that that was something that needed to be said. Generally, letters will assess your productivity, your independence, and most importantly, your potential in the future. And that is, of course, very nice to read, that someone feels that this is a person who has a lot of potential in the future. In the PI letter of support, as I already said, you look for buy-in, support for the person as well as for the project. Let's go to the next slide, which is the evaluation of the grant itself. 3 things matter. The most important is quality of the research proposal. After that is the applicant, and after that is the quality of grant writing. When you think about the quality of the research proposal, you're thinking about feasibility, you're thinking about how original is it, what is the impact it's going to have, what is the expected advance, what are the strengths and weaknesses of the proposal, does the person have the expertise to carry out the proposal, or are they going to be in the right place to acquire the expertise to carry out the proposal. When you look at the applicant, you look at the trajectory so far, and you look at the potential for independence. And the quality of grant writing, as I said earlier, readability, clarity, logical flow of ideas, do the objectives flow, that is the first objective, lead to the next, and so on and so forth. Finally, what happens when you come to the interview? The committee is trying to get to know you. They are not there, and you already heard from the previous people, they are not there, they want you to succeed. Nobody is looking to trip you up. Okay, we just want to have a pleasant, nice discussion with you. So I think that nervousness, if you can put it aside, that would probably benefit you in the interview. I should say that each interview is unique. There is no defined set of questions that anybody asks. In your short talk, and you will have only a short talk to give, hit the highlights. What are you doing? Why are you doing it? How are you going to do it? And what do you hope to learn? You already heard from the previous speaker. Practice, practice, practice. Just as I said, give yourself enough time to write the proposal and go through the step of sculpting it and developing it and refining it. Here too, it's the same process. Practice your talk so every sentence comes out the way you want it to and links to the next sentence by yourself, but practice to others who are both in and outside your field. Get them to ask you questions, get them to ask you different, because if you present to different people, they will ask you different questions, and see whether you can actually answer all of them. It really, really helps to present well thought out defense of ideas. Please again note that people will not always be in your area of research, but may follow the area generally. A lot of people read much more than just your area of research. So make sure you have a wider understanding of your area and where your proposal fits into it, okay, in terms of the wider area. Now let's go to the second slide, which I think she's already put in. You will be given what are reviewer-raised issues with your proposal. It would be very nice, and it is very nice, if in your interview, you sort of weave that in your talk as to how you respond to issues that the reviewers have raised. Proposals often improve by addressing these sorts of criticism or taking on board this kind of feedback. If there are lacunae in your proposal which have come in through the reviewers, or which you have subsequently realized because of some other reading you've done or some experiments you've done, acknowledge it, have a response to it. Interviewers will often ask for clarifications and sometimes details if they are missing from the proposal. As I said, many will be out of the field, so avoid esoteric jargon. It really helps if there is clarity in communications. Let me emphasize again, people in the room are not antagonistic to you in any way. They have spent a lot of time on your proposal. You should have fun with it. And the best interviews are scientific discussions. And it's really, really very pleasant to have them. It's a lot of fun. And there are people who have gone through the panel who's, you know, I was at a recent monsoon brain meeting, and this young lady who went through a committee and got her grant, I was asking, oh, have you already set this up in your lab? And she was like, oh my God, do you remember? I said, how can you not remember when you spend, I don't know, 20 hours reading that proposal and taking notes on it? You of course remember what people do. So it can be a very rewarding scientific discussion that you have with the people, because the reviewers have engaged with the proposal deeply. Okay. This is the end of my thoughts on how you should prepare for the ECF interview. I will add one slide which is not directly related to writing the grant, but one I think worth thinking about. In today's prior presentations, what has come up is a mentor is someone who can give you scientific feedback, is a person who's willing to look through data and discuss it. I want to emphasize that a mentor can be much more than that. A good mentor is valuable in many, many contexts, both in terms of looking at the data, but to looking at other career issues without having the close proximity and tensions that often come with very close relationships. They need not always be very closely associated with your field of research, but can be generally in it. What is critical, and I would encourage any person who applies to pick a mentor with whom you can discuss your science, your career issues, and anything else freely. And as with anything else, with your PhD supervisor, your fellowship supervisor, or your mentor, you have to find ways to build that relationship such that you can discuss things with them freely. And then I think what you would put in place is a group of people outside of, you know, the people who are in India Alliance and being very cooperative, who sort of support and help you develop your career over time and help you realize what your career goals are. So with that, I end. Thank you for your attention, and I hope something that I've said has been useful.
Thank you, Sandhya. We already have comments from our audience pouring in, calling it a very nice and comprehensive presentation. May I pose the first question from the audience to you, which is, what is the level of expertise expected from a candidate in the field of proposed research? Can a completely new area be explored?
Yes, absolutely. As long as you're going into a place where you can learn that, yes. There is, I mean, if you bring some intellectual continuity or technical continuity, of course, it will help in how fast you get off the ground. But that is not the limiting factor in any shape or form. As long as you as an applicant have, you know, as I already said, have a good track record and your proposal is well written and you're in the right environment where you can execute it, why not? Please feel free to change your field to do whatever is it that floats your boat. Science is hard enough without trying to put ourselves in all these boxes.
Another question for you, and meanwhile, may I ask our other panelists to please switch on their webcams? So the next question, Sandhya, is how do I fit literature background, project aims, methods and outcomes, all of it in 2,800 words? And how do I ensure that I'm not presenting too much or too little information?
So I would say that present, yes, writing grants is an art, and for many people who are going to write this fellowship application, it is probably one of the first grants you will write. Certainly may not be the first, but one of the first. Every sentence you put in, think about what is it that you're trying to convey through it and why is it important. Your initial draft might be much longer, and then you can trim. There are few people who can get it right in the first draft. 27, what was that she said? She had 27 drafts for a grant. When I write papers, my first paper from my own lab, I had 72 versions. So you just refine that, and that's why you need that time. So then you take a call on what is important and ask yourself, is this essential to convey? If it is, why do I think it is? And then proceed. This is why it's also important to get people outside the field to read your proposal. Is there enough detail there that they can follow what you're doing? Because if they can't, then you know you've cut out details. 2,800 words is actually a lot. I'm not joking. It's a fair bit. And I think if you spend a lot of time thinking about what you want to say and why you want to say it, the how will follow. But maybe the younger people should, they are the ones who wrote it. So they should comment on this.
Any
Hannah or
comments from
Masum?
Yeah, Masum, you want to answer that first?
Hannah, you can, yeah. Am I audible? Am I audible now?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Having listened to Hannah and Professor Sandhya, I feel I was kind of reminded of all my experiences that I went through 2 years back. And certainly, as both of them have suggested, it is really, really helpful to have practiced your talk, the 5-minute talk for your interview very well. Not just that, to have really thought out your proposal, your research question, and think of long term, as in also, put in place alternate plans, just in case the hypothesis that you've proposed um, works out in a different way, in not the way that you were expecting it to. So I think the reviewers also like to see whether you have, thought about how things would go if they do not as per what you have proposed. Certainly, it also helps to get your friends, your colleagues, your supervisor on the fellowship to hear you out as many number of times as possible, because I also remember, I think for about a month I was practicing for my interview, and it was like I had to time it, I had to make it so free flowing that nobody's able to, because you do not have time to just pause and ponder as to what should be my next sentence, or it should be a continuous flow of thoughts, a chain of thoughts, as Professor Sandhya just highlighted. Hannah, yeah, more experiences from you, because you've recently faced a committee.
Sorry, so was the question on writing the proposal or on attending the interview?
So the question was about application.
It was on word limit, 2,800 words is very short. How do you put in and how do you take a choice on what you put in and what you don't?
So I think for me, the 2,800 was a very reasonable word length. I was able to fit in, yes, the first drafts was all over the place. So it was a lot more technical, a lot more jargon that is from my own imaging perspective, and very little for, from the clinical aspect of it. There were parts of it where I was trying to explain too much or explain very little because I didn't have enough experience. So that was coming through in each of the drafts. So as and when I got feedback from my mentors and for both experts as well as non-subject experts. So I had somebody from IT field read it for me, and he said, I can't understand anything that you're saying on the medical side. And from the medical side, my mentor was like, this is too much of jargon. I wouldn't understand what you're trying to say. So it was trying to balance out how much of the technical information you're putting in, but it was also more like actually telling a story. So these are the objectives that I have. This is how I want to do it. This is what I have done previously that may feed into this aspect of my first aim. And after I have achieved my first aim, this is how it will, move on to my second aim. And my third aim, I kept it a little more futuristic. If I'm able to achieve both 1 and 2, it will lead on to my third aim. But I know there may be limitations because that third aim is not fully within the scope of just my control, because I'm proposing to put it out as an open source repository, but I need permissions from all the stakeholders who own the data, the institution. So I have already mentioned that as one of the things that I foresee, but I hope that I will be able to do it, if not within this grant, but I'm making steps to see that I will be able to achieve it in some form, in some shape or form. So I think it's about also understanding the limitations that you are foreseeing in your work, and if you can put that up front, so that gives the reviewers probably a sense of that you have thought through the entire process, what you may think you will run into, what you will be able to achieve or not in that 5 years. So
Thank you, the three of you. Before we move to the next question, I would like to inform our audiences, since we are running behind time, but we still have a lot of questions, we'll extend for another 10 minutes. We hope you bear with us for that time. The next question is for Madhavan. What should be the criteria that one has to keep in mind for choice of fellowship supervisor? And what if that proposed supervisor is going to retire within a year or so?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. So fellowship supervisor, as I mentioned earlier, is somebody who will supervise your research, provide you with inputs and infrastructure and everything. So this should be that should be the criteria. So there should be a person who knows the field, who knows the problem and has experience having worked in that area. He or she should be able to look at your proposal, give inputs and things like that. So if the supervisor is going to retire within a year, it's a mandatory requirement that the supervisor should have the tenure at the host institution for at least the 5-year duration of the fellowship. So we encourage our applicants to consider a supervisor who has that kind of a tenure. But if it's absolutely necessary, or for example, in a case where the fellowship supervisor is not tenured, is a new assistant professor and might be tenured during the duration, you can propose an alternate supervisor who can be a mentor already in the full application and will be in the know of the application of the research and its progress. And then in case something happens and the supervisor can't continue because the tenure didn't go through, or he or she retired, then the alternate supervisor can take on. But this is only a contingency plan. We encourage our applicants to choose a supervisor who can give the continuous supervision throughout the 5-year duration of the fellowship.
Thank you, Madhavan. The next question is for Sandhya. What are some mistakes that one should absolutely try to avoid at an interview, the ECF interview?
Sandhya, you need to unmute yourself. Yeah.
I've never had, I think, if you show up in the interview and you have not planned your talk, that's a big no-no. Please plan your talk well and sort of think about what you want to say and how you want to say it. There have been a few cases where I felt that aspect of thing had not been given sufficient attention. The other thing is to really treat it as a scientific dialogue and not to think of the committee as somehow having an adversarial relationship with you. I think that sort of makes it much more pleasant for both sides. And people ask questions because they're curious. Scientists in general are curious. And of course, a committee which is filled with scientists is going to be curious. Oh, why are you saying that? Doesn't that apply? And then I think if you convert it into a conversation, you'll have a better experience. People who struggle with that aspect of it end up often having a bad experience. But I think, the things that we went through today, if you take care of those, I haven't seen any real red flags unless people have really not thought about their proposal and the lacunae and what their strengths are, or not address the reviewers' comments. Those are things you should not do. You must think about the reviewers' comments. You have to say, okay, why did I get that comment? Do I agree? Do I disagree? If I disagree, I want to say it. If I agree and I've made a change, I want to share that as well. So those are the key things you should do. And I think you'll have this presentation available online, and that slide is there. I think it's the second in the interview question. And those things, if you take care of, usually it's a very smooth process. So address the reviewers' questions. Have a friendly relationship with the committee. They are not, they want you to succeed, and practice your talk.
Perfect. Thank you, Sandhya. Madhavan, we have a question which is coming again and again. What exactly would you call the key criteria that make a prelim application successful or tending towards becoming successful? Is this just the proposal or the publications? I know Sandhya has covered this, but maybe if you can provide the office perspective.
So when the office is screening the prelim applications, we majorly look for eligibility. If the applicant is meeting the eligibility criteria, as I said, for a maximum of 4 years experience, and if the host institution is meeting the eligibility criteria, if the fellowship supervisor is suitable to mentor or supervise the proposed research work. We also look at the remit of the proposed research. The applicants have to submit a brief up to 750 word abstract of the research that they are planning to do. So we look at whether the proposed research is within the remit of India Alliance's funding. We also look for competitiveness of the applicant, which includes their career trajectory, their track record, their consistency of productivity, and how enthusiastic they are in their application, and how it comes through the grantsmanship and things like that. So basically, the criteria we look for are the eligibility, remit, and competitiveness.
Thank you, Madhavan. I think we'll wrap up with a final question for both Masum and Hannah. This is about generally how the fellowship has helped you with your research goals, and specifically, has it helped you develop any collaborations that were otherwise not possible? And how do you think this is going to shape your future career?
Hannah, would you like to start off on this?
Okay, so I will take the question first. So in terms of, I'm still in my first year, but I think for me, I feel I am so much more in a space than much better space than I was when I was putting my application together. Like, I know what it is now to be able to communicate something a little more succinctly, to be able to think of it from different perspectives. So that for me was a very, very huge learning curve, because it was very different writing the grant itself. This was my first big grant for a full research proposal. I have been awarded fellowships before, but for a full scientific proposal. So it's very different approach than writing your manuscripts, because for the manuscript you are writing your own technical work, how you did it. But this was more of a visionary approach, where you need to think of how you would do it, who you would be doing it with. Are you equipped to do everything on your own? If not, how do you, bring in your collaborators? And in terms of answering, has it improved my chances of collaborations? Yes, definitely. A lot more doors open up for me because I'm an India Alliance fellow. I think that would not have been possible if I was not associated with the India Alliance. So a lot more of the opportunities do occur because of me being an India Alliance fellow. So I think for me, that is a huge experience.
Yes, I would like to add to just what Hannah said, and sky is the limit, because with the flexibility that India Alliance provides, we can always at any point bring in new collaborators such that our work or our research shapes in a productive way. For example, in my case, I have to study muscle development and the role of signaling, or how signaling regulates that muscle development uh, during the embryonic, the fetal stages. Now, this involves several different strains, and with one particular strain, I was facing a lot of issues, and somehow I couldn't get it to breed. So that was the point where I contacted several other veterinarians and scientists at other institutes, for example, NCBS at NI, and then I heard from them as to how they are doing, how they are working with difficult strains to get them to breed and all those things, and that was really, really helpful for me. I also added one of them as my collaborators, and now a particular knockout that was not, somehow I was not getting it at my place, I was able to get that, and I've gotten started off with it. So certainly the flexibility that exists or is built into the fellowship is really helpful, because at times the technical know-how or whatever resources are available at your particular host institute might not just be sufficient, to take you to that next step where your project would progress the way you have seen it that it should. So that is where collaborations really help. So certainly, I think now that I am progressing well with whatever I was a basic requirement for my work, I think I should be progressing further onto the next aims and objectives, which was becoming a limitation as long as this obstacle was not overcome. And here I really like to say one thing, that India Alliance never saddles you with paperwork. So the minute I told them that I need a collaborator, I need to bring in a collaborator to help me kind of progress with my work, they were really welcome about it, and they kind of facilitated the entire process. And I'm thankful to them for this. Hina, I hope I've answered the question and in its entirety. All right.
Yes. Thank you, Masum. I'm sure all our staff is quite pleased with what we've got to hear about us and the way we work. Thanks again. With this, we come to an end. Thank you again, all of you, Sandhya, Masum, Hannah, and Madhuvan, for being so open to questions and so responsive. Before we end, please allow me to make a few quick announcements. The call for application for the early career fellowships in basic biomedical sciences is currently open. If you're a final year PhD student or an early postdoctoral scientist who wishes to undertake high quality research and establish yourself as an independent researcher in India, please consider applying to the scheme. The preliminary application deadline for the current round is 11th of August next month. Also called for another scheme, Senior and Intermediate Fellowships in Basic Biomedical Research, closes in a week, that is on 30th of July. If you have any questions related to any of these fellowship schemes, please write to info@indiaalliance.org. Once this session ends, you will be redirected to a quick survey. Please take a minute to provide your valuable feedback to us. It will help us get better. This brings us to an end, and I would again like to thank you all for joining us today. Please take care and stay safe. Bye-bye.